This event has begun. It is now being recorded.
Welcome to everybody. We're so glad you're here with us today. I'm Jatrice Martel-Gator, Executive Vice President of External Affairs at Volunteers of America. And I'm also a very proud board member of Generations United. Thank you for joining us today as we release our new signature report, Family Matters. Multi-generational living is on the rise and here to stay. This event is being recorded, and the recording will be available on Generations United's website, which is also where you can access a full copy of the report. So we hope you will go and get a copy of the report. We're also live streaming on Facebook, so welcome to those of you who are joining us from Facebook. And however you are joining us, please remember to tweet using the hashtag MultiGenReport. You see it right there. Now, today, we're going to learn about the results of a new national survey of multi-generational families and hear from the professional experts and the real experts who are living in multi-generational households. We're going to close out with recommendations to make it easier, more widespread, and acceptable for increasing numbers of families to live in multi-generational households and families that can thrive. And there will be time for questions and answers at the end of the panel. So you can join us with your questions on Zoom. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. You see the box throughout the event. And right now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our incredible CEO with bold, audacious vision for multi-generational policies and issues that support more families throughout this country, the Donna Butts.
Jatrice, I don't know if I've ever had such a wonderful welcome. I really appreciate you. You're an incredible board member, and we really, really appreciate all you do for Generations United. And I want to thank everyone today who's joined us for this webinar to talk about this really important topic in our country. Anthropologist Margaret Mead said, nobody has ever before asked the nuclear family to live in a box the way that we do, with no relatives, no support. We've put it in an impossible situation. Yet for years, our country perpetuated the idea that we should all be independent, go it alone, or we're losers. As a result of this rugged individualism thinking and families moving away from each other, in an increasingly mobile society, the number of multi-generational households declined in America, and by 1960, just 15% of Americans lived in multi-generational families. This is changing, and for the better. Dr. Mead would love to see the resurgence in multi-generational households that we're experiencing in this country. I'm sure she would have celebrated the findings we're sharing today. At Generations United, we believe all generations, our communities, and our country are stronger together. And today's multi-generational families, which we define as 3 generations or more, are proof of that. 10 years ago, we released our first report, and until now, our only report on multi-generational households. Back then, during the Great Recession, we found that of those who responded to the National Harris poll that we commissioned, 7% lived in multi-generational families. Why, they said? They said that living together enriched their lives, helped making caring for children and older family members easier, and boosted family members' economic stability. Many speculated at the time that this number would decline when the economy improved. It didn't. Families may have come together by need. They stayed together by choice. Yet now, 10 years later, working with Harris again to conduct a similar national survey, even we were surprised by what we learned. Multi-generational households have increased from 7% that we found in 2010 to 26%, a whooping 271%, with 1 in 4 Americans saying they live in such a household. Once again, an outside force has precipitated the increase, with 57% saying they came together because of the COVID pandemic. As Americans hunkered down, we were faced with new dilemmas. How do we work remotely from home? How do we continue our children's education when they can't go to a classroom? How do we stay connected to older relatives who are locked down and isolated in care facilities or in their own homes? And unemployment, especially in certain industries, soared. Once again, as they have many times in the past, families came together to pool resources, support each other, and help family members survive. They formed interdependent, multi-generational households. And what hasn't changed since our last report is that they plan to stay together. Indeed, 72% say they intend to stay together in the long term, post-pandemic and beyond. This is due in no small part to their success. An astonishing 98% of those responding to the survey said their family functioned successfully. They found ways to celebrate and make their living arrangement work, though not without stress, as 75% of the respondents reported. Jane Graham, who lives with her 5 grandchildren, said, "I will be honest, there are days when I'm overloaded, overstimulated probably, and I need to have quiet time and get away." So what does the average multi-generational household look like today? Our survey found that 49% of the households have an annual income of $100,000 or greater. 76% of the households include the home owner. Nearly half have children under the age of 18. They are predominantly found in the South and the West of our country. Close to half are headed by a white family member, followed by Hispanic and then Black non-Hispanic. 77% are employed, and 55% have at least some higher education. Why did the households form? Well, they form for a variety of reasons, and those reasons include caring for family members. Like Vivian Nixon said about her grandma Tuck, she raised everybody. So when it comes to her, it's just a no-brainer. She's been a guiding force for our family. So at the end of the day, when she needs something, we're there. There are also cultural and family expectations, as Dulce Medina illustrated for us when she said, "It's a cultural thing. I think we're just going to stick together. No matter the situation, family always has to come first." They report benefits from living in a multi-generational household, including enhanced bonds. As Jane Graham, the grandmother who reported stress with living with her 5 grandchildren, also said, "I'm closer with the grandchildren I live with. I spend a lot more time with them. They know me better, and I know their personalities. I'm the one who takes them on bike rides and into the park and sledding. It's worked out well, and I'm happy here." It's also easier on caregiving. As a colleague in Arizona said, "We are really dependent on my father throughout the day to keep Sachi, our 2-year-old, entertained, safe, and healthy, and ensure that she's engaged in active play." And it also helps improve finances. Our country was founded and built by multi-generational households. We're not advocating to go back to the way things were, but to go forward to the way that things can be and make it easier for multi-generational families to live and thrive together. They are, in fact, here to stay. They understand that we're interdependent, stronger together, and as a country, we should celebrate their success and embrace this new way of living, which really isn't new, but it's improved and healthy and helps many, many communities and families. So thank you for your interest in our report. I wanted to move on quickly because I'm just delighted and honored to have the opportunity to introduce Amy Goyer. Amy is a national expert in caregiving and multi-generational families. She's also a valued longtime colleague and friend. And most importantly today, she's the report's author who's going to dig deeper into multi-generational living with some just really terrific and interesting panelists. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Donna. It's such a great pleasure to be here. And I was thinking it kind of feels like we're giving birth today. This report has been really a labor of love and of great interest to me. I've lived multi-generationally myself at times, and I think we all can identify with something in this report. I want to introduce our panelists. If you want to go ahead and show us your video now. We have Robin Winham, and her daughter Katie Stewart was supposed to be with us today, and Robin can explain why she's not here. They've had a health crisis in the family, which often happens in multi-generational families. Robin's coming from Bristol, Connecticut, and she's currently living in a multi-generational household that spans 4 generations. We have Dr. Jessica Lautz, who is in Arlington, Virginia. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia. She's right up the street from me, really. And she's Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights with the National Association of Realtors. And she also grew up living with her grandparents, so she'll tell us a little bit about that. And now Kevin Kennedy. Kevin, if you want to click on your video and your audio so we can see you. There he is. Hi, Kevin. Kevin is coming to us from near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he is a contractor. His contracting company is VSP Home Remodeling. He's also the host of a national podcast called Your Valuable Home. He's quite an expert at home renovations and modifications, and he actually has a multi-generational household himself. His in-laws live in his household, so he'll be telling us a little bit about that. So thank you and welcome to all of you. I want to start with you, Robin. Tell us about your multi-generational household. Who lives there? You know, I know your mother-in-law is right next door, so we count her as part of your household. And why did your family decide to form a multi-generational household?
So it was kind of born out of necessity. I moved in with my husband and his 2 sons and figured, okay, it was the best thing to do. His mother has lived next door. He grew up in the home next door. His mom is now 94 and she doesn't want to leave her house. So this was the best option and the best thing to do. Then my daughter had my grandson. She was not living with me when I moved in. And then the relationship with her son's father broke apart. And my daughter and my grandson both have brittle bone disease, osteogenesis imperfecta. My daughter is 27, has had over 130 fractures in her life. My grandson is 6, and he's had, including the one last night where he fractured his foot, we're at 8 so far. So out of necessity, single mom she was, it just made sense financially for her to move in here. So she had been working nights and I worked days. So we swapped taking care of my grandson. And instead of her picking him up at 11 o'clock at night and taking him home, it just made more sense to stay here. So I have my 2 stepsons, my husband, myself, my 27-year-old daughter, my 6-year-old grandson, and my 95-year-old mother-in-law next door.
Oh, she's 95 now. Well, happy birthday.
Well, 94, 95. I can never keep track.
That, right? Yeah, well, I thought maybe she'd had a birthday. Yeah. And Katie isn't with us because of the broken foot last night. She's with her son at the doctor. She was going to give a little of her perspective, but I was able to talk with Katie, and you'll see she's quoted in the report as well. And that, I remember her saying in the beginning, she thought, how is this going to work? But she's been amazed at how well, the family has blended and how the household has worked. What do you think about the actual home and how it is, how conducive is it to multi-generational living?
We live in an old Victorian in Connecticut. The house turns 100 next year. So we make it work. it's not the most conducive, but as you see, the stairs behind me are the only stairs to my daughter and my grandson's room. They do have to share a room at this point in time because we don't have more bedrooms. I need an office for my work. I've been working from home for 11 years now, long before the pandemic. So, I needed someplace to work, and so it just made sense. So there's another set of stairs around. We actually do have 2 kitchens, which does work well for us, but we make the best out of the space that we do have.
So the stairs that we see go up to the part of the house that was like a separate,
Right.
living area with a kitchen and everything, and that's where Katie
Yes.
and her son are.
Yes, that's where they are. And then up the other stairs is actually the other 3 bedrooms, etc. So
Yeah, it was in the report. Some of the things that families said help make this successful for their families is the number of bedrooms and the number of bathrooms. It's such a basic thing. I'm sure, Kevin, you would agree with that. And Jessica, you would agree with that. And that I know when I lived with my father lived with me in his 90s, and my sister and my 2 nephews who were young adults moved in with us. And we didn't have enough bedrooms. So my nephews in their early 20s had to sleep in bunk beds in 1 bedroom. And that only lasted a year till the house next door came open for rent. And then, like you've said, having your mother-in-law next door, it's kind of the next best thing, and maybe even better, because it's considered like one big household.
Right. She's immediately across the driveway, and that's the distance between their house and ours. We do have 2 kitchens, and we have 2 bathrooms. We are soon going to be 1 kitchen and 1 bathroom. We're going to be remodeling. So that will be interesting in a household of 6, but we'll make it work. But as Kevin can attest, that's not always a fun thing. But,
I might add that Robin's husband is a contractor, so he's doing the work.
So at least I know he'll get it done quickly, because, sharing 1 bathroom between 6 people is not fun. But so it does work, for the number of bedrooms we do have. But, we could switch, and I could move my office into the upstairs kitchen if I needed to. But that's the whole thing with multi-generational households and blended families in general, is that you make do with what you've got and you make it work.
Yeah. And you've made it work. Do you feel like overall this is a successful situation for you?
Yeah, actually I do. My daughter and my stepsons bicker just like siblings, even though they've only been together for 5 years. They bicker just like they've grown up with each other. And they love my grandson as kind of a little brother as opposed to an uncle. They feel kind of like it's their brother. But so it does work.
What do you think about the stress? Donna mentioned that there's stress in families. And how does your family manage the stresses that are kind of inherent in a situation like this?
Communication is really the biggest thing. Yeah, it is hard to tell a teenager you got to be quiet because the baby's taking a nap, or something along those lines. It does get very difficult. My stepson's wonderful late teens, early 20s, and one of them's still sleeping now. So you get the differences in bedtimes and work schedules and everything else. And if you don't communicate about that, if something's bothering you, it really will fester. And we've noticed that. So you got to help out. You got to, do your part around the house, but you've also got to let us know what's going on. If something's wrong, if you really dislike something, you've got to tell us and tell the other person, so that it doesn't fester, because there's not a whole lot of private space here except maybe your bedroom, and that's about all. So, you do need communication as one of the biggest keys to that stress.
How has the pandemic affected all of this for you?
For me, everybody's home. Before it was just me home and the occasional person, maybe one person. Now everybody's been home. So it's a little noisier for me. I find I shut the door a little more often. When I'm working, my grandson may come up next to me and wave to everybody on camera at work. So for that, it's a little bit more difficult and a little bit more stressful. And sometimes the boundary of, hey, Robin, can you, while I'm in a different meeting or in the middle of work, can sometimes become stressful in and of itself, but setting those boundaries and trying to tell folks I can't do it now, it'll have to wait, or something along those lines works out well.
I know that I believe Donna mentioned, some of the top causes for families coming into a multi-generational living household, and you kind of fit all of them because both childcare and education and elder care were at both at 34%, and jobs came in third at 30%. And I know that Katie lost her job because of the pandemic, correct?
Yes, Katie lost her job. She worked at a concert venue, and obviously with no concerts, she was no longer able to work. She was working box office and shows, etc. So she couldn't work, on top of the fact with schools being closed. My grandson was being homeschooled, and with my job during the day, I couldn't do both. So it really did impact that. Thankfully, they were living here first. I can't imagine what they would have done had they not been living here with me, because she needed that additional support. Financially, she wouldn't have been able to survive.
Yeah. That kind of says it all right there. I'm going to stop here, and then I know you'll come back in later with more thoughts, but thank you so much for sharing your personal situation. And
Anytime.
it has been, that's what makes this real, I think, is all of us understanding the ins and outs of it. And Jessica, I want to go to you, and I know that you grew up in a household with your grandparents, correct?
I did, yeah. I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, and my grandparents lived right in the city, and we lived with them on and off, not consistently, but I would say probably more times than less. And they were just such a wonderful influence on my life, I have to say. I honestly wouldn't be where I am today without their influence. They were a very stable unit, a wonderful I guess grandma and grandpa, but they taught me honestly everything. So they were great.
Wow. That's such a statement that you don't know where you'd be without them, and having grown up living with them. I'm sure that's something, I'm sure you miss them. And it's something that was common for many years to have your grandparents in the same household. My mom's grandfather lived with them, but not as common. Our generation, my generation, it's not as common. So in some ways you were fortunate, it sounds like, to have them living in the household with you.
Oh, I absolutely was fortunate. They really were wonderful. I mean, even from earliest childhood memories of them going through math books and teaching me how to read before school had even started for me, or they were huge cooks. And so Easter this weekend, it's a good memory for me that we used to sit at the kitchen table and make all the frosting on the hot cross buns that they do, honestly, hundreds of for their church. So I'm going to break out the recipe that they used this weekend, actually. So I'm excited for that.
That's great. One of the things we found in the report is that cultural and family expectations was a driver for about 24%, I believe, of families. And one of the benefits is this opportunity to pass on family traditions and cultures, and cooking and food is a lot of it. You get to learn from each other some of these things. And when you're living with the person, you just have much more opportunity to do that. Now,
Absolutely.
Jessica, I'm excited for you to share with us. You're moving on to your professional life. You are with the National Association of Realtors, and you have recently had a profile of home buyers and sellers survey. And so that revealed some really interesting insights about buying and selling multi-generational homes prior to and after the pandemic. So tell us about those findings.
Yeah, I think it's actually one of the more interesting findings that we had from this report this year. We've done it for, this will be the 40th year in 2021. We've done it back to 1981. And this is the largest share of multi-generational buyers that we had during the pandemic. It's 1 in 6 buyers who are actually purchasing a multi-generational home. And the findings match up really, really closely with what you're seeing as the big driver this year is for aging parents to come and live in that home. And they hadn't lived there originally, and now they're there. And some of that's, of course, I think safety from COVID, concern of people living independently right now, and loneliness that could happen during the pandemic. I think some of it is probably childcare reasons too, though, because daycares and schools have been closed or restricted. So just having that help on site is obviously very, very helpful to those family units to have that additional help. And certainly we're seeing cost savings as well. People can pool their money and buy a larger single family house that perhaps would have been out of reach before. So that's certainly a big driver as well.
Did you see a really significant bump right around the time the pandemic hit, or how long did it take for this change to kind of show?
It was an immediate change in the data, actually. It was early in the pandemic that we have data from, and it jumped from 11% to 15%, which data-wise, that's a big jump. So you're talking about 1 in 10 buyers to 1 in 6 buyers saying, I need a multi-generational home, and probably changing their space that they actually had lived in before because they suddenly need more space, or perhaps even have different demands in that house. If you have an older adult relative, does that home accommodate that older adult relative? Talking about main floor bedrooms, and I'm sure Kevin Kennedy probably has a ton to add to this topic here, but making sure that those safety precautions are in that house, I think could be a really big concern for those older relatives.
Do you find that people are looking for homes that are already ready for multi-generational living, or are they looking for bigger homes that they can kind of do some renovations and modifications to make them more appropriate for their families?
For these individuals who are buying this multi-generational home, I suspect that many of the things are probably in place. They probably don't want to have to live through a renovation project as they're just moving into a brand new home. But I suspect that there's a lot of people who are taking on renovations if they can find a good, steady contractor who can come in and help them, which I know is really hard to do right now too. But we're certainly seeing this huge uptick in these buyers. And I think that this is probably here to stay. I agree with the findings that you guys have, that this is probably not a temporary move. If you're purchasing a home, you're probably doing this for the long haul.
No, I think that's such an interesting point. And we're going to come back to that point about the future. But I wondered also if you've seen any differences among the generations. I think you look at Generation X and baby boomers, et cetera. What do you see in terms of who's buying these multi-generational homes?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in the past, we'd always thought that the boomers, especially the younger boomers right now, were that multi-generational buyer. This year, what we found is that the biggest generation purchasing multi-generational homes is actually Gen Xers. So that little generation that's wedged between the mammoth of the millennials and the mammoth of the boomers, they're the ones who are purchasing these multi-generational homes, 18% of them. That's a very large share. You're talking about nearly 1 in 4 at that point, or nearly 1 in 5. This is a very large share. I think it's very interesting too, to look at this generation and know that they do have aging parents, but they also probably have someone who changed their post-secondary plans. Who maybe was going to go to college, live on a college campus, and now they're home. And then they could be in their childhood bedroom, where that family might have to juggle and figure a better place to live for everyone there.
It's a really good point. You know, we hear about boomerang kids, young adults who come back home because either, as you say, there's education involved, or they're saving up to buy their own home, or there's lots of different reasons, or they've lost a job due to the pandemic. So you can see, as you say, this Generation X is kind of a sandwich generation. And in fact, some of the younger baby boomers are also in a sandwich generation situation where they've got older parents and they've got kids who are still home and they're still responsible for. So I think that's an interesting finding. We've been saying the baby boomers are coming for a long time, and they are aging, and Generation X and Generation Y, Z, all the other generations are kind of moving into that caregiving zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And early in the pandemic, we saw the largest share of young adults living at home since the Great Depression. It actually tipped all the way up to 52% at one point, which is just an incredible share. And I think it's actually retreated at this point as some jobs have been rehired and some colleges have opened back up. But that's a lot of young adults who need to be in some sort of living situation, which was not their probably planned living situation. But also perhaps a lot of families taking care of each other in that scenario.
Absolutely. I'm sorry to interrupt. You bring up something interesting in terms of the Great Recession. How do you compare the data that you saw during the Great Depression around multi-generational homes versus now?
So we started collecting this data right after the Great Recession, and we saw the highest point that we had collected was right after the Great Recession. It was 14%, and right now we're at 15%. So it's significantly higher, and it had trailed down. It was 11, 12% and really was not a significant uptick just until COVID. Sorry, there's like a cat trying to attack my camera right now. That's what I'm pushing away here.
This is what everybody's doing at home.
It really has been this very interesting dynamic where very quickly in April and June, we did see this change.
Very interesting. Was there anything else surprising for you in your most recent data?
So I think the other thing is we do cut this data by race as well. And it's not a surprise that we do see minority families embracing this way of living. It's nearly a quarter actually of Asian home buyers and Pacific home buyers are actually purchasing a multi-generational home as well. So similar findings to what you guys had were Hispanic home buyers, Asian Pacific home buyers, Black African American home buyers embracing this way of living at higher shares. And as we see that they are a growing share of the population, I would expect that this share overall is only going to increase moving forward.
That's a really important point. That's a very good point. Absolutely. I want to move over to Kevin now and see his perspective. Kevin, tell us about your personal multi-generational living situation first, because I know that you have modified the space above your garage so that your in-laws could live there. What did you do to the home and what kind of challenges and being the contractor, you probably are thinking ahead of their needs in the future too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It was something forthcoming for us. It was actually a two-part multi-generational for us. We actually lived with our in-laws for a couple of years. And one of the things we did was we sold our house and we were looking to downsize and I was going to build a house. Well, my wife at the time, 2 weeks before settlement, Jessica will love this, she decided not to move there. And I needed to build a house. The house wasn't being built yet. I figured it would take me about 2 months, 3 months to get it started. So we're going to live with the in-laws. Well, it ended up being 2.5 years that were there because we couldn't find a home. There was no homes out there. So we found a home. We were here for about 2.5 years and we decided for the in-laws to come move with us. And I've been very blessed. I've been very blessed that they're here. I tell you, yeah, it's good.
It's good. It's good. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you have a very close relationship with them. You've lived with them before. How old are they? Do they have care needs at this point? Are they fairly independent?
They're fairly independent. My father-in-law is 82. My mother-in-law, I'm not going to mention our age because I've got to deal with it. So she's listed. But they're both in great health. And that was one of the deciding factors on what I was going to build for them. We're set up for the future if something does happen. If something where they need additional care, or if since they're on the second floor, the steps I made wider to put in a chairlift if need be, but everything's set up in place. And being a contractor, seeing that and foreseeing, since we're doing so many multi-generational homes now, with that being in place, I can foresee a lot of the needs that people need. I call them the life needs that people are asking for. So walking with them step by step, I can really work with them as being a contractor. And usually what I do is I flip in and out of being a contractor and the host of the show, so I can give them a non-biased report. So I can say, hey, listen, I'm not trying to sell you, but why don't we just go into the radio show mode and then I can just guide you in the right direction. Because sometimes people want this grand idea of what they're going to be building, like my mother-in-law, which when she thought she was going to be wanting something very nice, she met with my architect and was building a 19,000 square foot house. I'm over exaggerating, but I said, well, it was a little bit too big. We're deciding what you need. And once we finally found a budget and something that was going to be great for everybody, it worked. It really did. It worked.
And do they have their own sitting area, living room, what kitchen up there?
Yes, they have pretty much everything possible. We're off the side of the house, which they have their own entrance. And I also put a door on my side too, that I can always lock the door to keep them out. But yeah, they have their own entrance. They have their own living room, kitchen. We separated the bedrooms, 90%, 10%. My father-in-law has a 10%, a little small bedroom. And my mother-in-law, who's the matriarch, she got the big bedroom. So she's very happy with that. But we accommodated the needs of what they needed as being a contractor and as a homeowner.
Nice. So do you share family meals together? What kind of interaction? And also, I forget, do you have children at home as well?
Yes, I have an 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. We share every meal together. Some of my mother-in-law's friends say that the reason why I moved her in because he's a chef. She's a retired chef. And I said, yeah, you're probably right. So we do family meals every or almost every night. They're still very independent. They're well on their own, but family dinners are the staple of our family. Absolutely.
Do you find that facilitates communication in your family? It was one of the things that came up in the survey that people said helped make it successful is having regular family meals together or family meetings to help with that communication that Robin was talking about. Does that work? Is that kind of when you all chat and talk any problems that are come up?
Yeah. I tell you, it's not just the family meetings. I catch during the night, sometimes my daughter or my son are shooting up to their apartment and just having a great chat. The communication, Rob was absolutely right. Communication is essential. And it's essential where it's just not family meetings at the dinner table. It's all the time. Any possible chance that we could get, we're communicating. So we're together, and I've been very blessed to have all this.
Yeah, wonderful. So tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from your clients. I know when we chatted, you said that you've seen an uptick in the number of people who are doing modifications and renovations because they are engaged in multi-generational living.
There has been a major uptick. Now, what we're finding is again, I don't know the new sales of homes, but what I do is the residential side. I try to figure out a way that would work to get an in-law, son, whatever it takes to get back into that family where we can put something on that's going to be useful for the whole family. And probably at COVID, within 2 months after COVID, we probably had close to 50% of our phone calls were additions for in-law suites. And that was our biggest thing over the past couple of months. Also, it's going strong, the in-law suites.
Interesting. Are you finding that these are families that are doing this because their loved ones were isolated and they want to connect during COVID? Are they bringing people home from a nursing home? And what do you know about that?
Just like Jessica said, everything that was there, it's all involved. It could be taking care, just bringing a family together, lifestyles. It's working. Everything is working. There's everyone that I spoke to that if I couldn't do the job, I referred somebody. I dealt with my architect who referred people because it was more of a need to get it done quickly. And we couldn't get to a lot of them quickly. But when I talked to them over the times, they were thanking me that I got them in the right direction, working out a budget. And I said, well, how things are going? It couldn't be better. Everybody just said they couldn't be better. It just basically built around the family. Family's the whole thing that really kept us together. And that's what most of our listeners and everybody that do cousins of the show, they say the same thing. It's having the family together is awesome.
That's a great statement right there. I think what you said about the fact that it had to be done quickly, I think that's so key because I know during the pandemic, it's been hard. We're renovating house. It's been hard to find contractors. So you've referred people on because you can't do it all, even though I know you would like to, you just can't. And so that I think, having it done quickly because you couldn't wait 6 months to move your loved ones in. The other issue that has come up a lot is having grandparents move in to help with the child education because the kids were at home, learning at home, and grandparents have really stepped up to the plate, some of them doing it from a distance, but many of them kind of moving in to take on that role. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, what I do notice if I'm over there, if I have to do some additional work, they use it for childcare. That was one of the big things, childcare, that both parents were working. They needed a little bit more availability, and it was a perfect match. In our situation, it worked out great for us. Even when we lived with them, it made it a lot easier on us. Stress off my wife and I it was immense. It was that's what led us to bringing them here, because it made our lives better. My wife and I's life so much better having them here, and it really does. It does work.
That's really great. And that kind of brings me to our final question that I want to throw out to all of you. From your perspective, what is important for families to think about when they are considering living in a multi-generational household? You know, what should they be thinking about? And what should the housing industry and organizations and et cetera be thinking about going forward? Robin, why don't you start with that? What advice would you have? What do you think families should be thinking about?
Thinking about, if this is your forever home and you're thinking about blending families, what's going to fit long term? If you have that option, remember single floor living, no stairs, or like Kevin indicated, wider stairs. You know, there's all sorts of different studies and different products that are out there that are easier on older adults and even younger ones. But you know, I think for the most part is just understanding it might be the 2 master bedroom suites, the 2 areas, the 2 kitchens, or something along those lines, or room to expand and have that built, going forward. One of those things, because you really do need to think about, okay, well, this might happen, this might happen. If I had space, my mother would probably be living with us too, but there's no space for her in my house, and we can't build an addition. So it is items like that. When you're thinking about where you're going, what's the long-term plan, and communicate about that. And, being one of those.
Whoops, we lost your sound. Oh, we lost Robin. We can come, oh, there she is.
One of those sandwich generations is, you're taking care of the
youngest and the oldest. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Robin, your audio.
Try to think long term.
There we go. Well, I just to paraphrase what I think you were saying is that you have to think about long term what the current and future needs are going to be. And I think that's a really good point. What would you add, Jessica?
I think, Robin is spot on thinking about both short-term and long-term needs. I think, coming from the realtor perspective, making sure that you're communicating this with your realtor, who's expected to live in that home, so that they can watch out for properties that either could be larger or could have that master bedroom or the owner suite on that first floor, to make sure that folks are safe. Also going into it knowing maybe personal space will be a premium. So maybe you don't need that open floor living in that house, because you actually do need some quiet time for folks. So they can either Zoom at home or Zoom school, or just having that quiet time to read a book can be really important just for personal space. But I think just going in eyes wide open into what to expect into that. Are you thinking about this for a short-term financial gain so that someone can save money for a down payment? Or are you thinking this longer term, where we're going to be here for the next 20 years or 15 years, however long we're going into this, and what's that going to mean?
Yeah, really good points. Okay, we're about out of time, but Kevin, can you wrap this up for us? So what advice would you have for families?
Well, one of the things I want to add that's going to be quick was a couple of my customers and some people that I called again for great advice, where they're looking for a quick home care because of the situation with the nursing homes. I try to tell people, listen, let's stay inside the box, the envelope, which is inside your house. Sometimes an addition is going to take a long time to plan, get the permits, get the contractors lined up. Let's work with inside your house. We can keep that budget to where it can be done quickly, and we can get your loved one moved in as quick as possible. So if there's an office that could be generated into a bathroom and a bedroom to make it a lot easier, those are also viable ways that people can make this and make it quick to accommodate what their needs are going to be. It's not all about sometimes, yes, if you do have that availability to put an addition on, then time, that can be done, but let's try to work in sometimes inside the envelope to make it more accommodating. So I look at it and find there's all different ways, all different walks of life where people are going to need certain needs. And once you find that life need out for that for me as a potential customer, and or for anybody that's looking for great advice, what you find that need is going to make it a lot easier for everybody in the long run.
And that's what it's about. It's about making it easier for everyone. It's about having those closer bonds with the family and having that opportunity for, you know, many of you have mentioned communication and sharing family traditions and meals and culture. I think all of these things kind of wrap it up. So there's the practical matters of the space, and then there's the essential family matters as well. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Donna. Thank you so much, all of you, for being a part of this today, for sharing your personal and your professional backgrounds and experiences.
I'd like to echo that and say thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jessica and Kevin and Robin. You know, data can daze, but stories really bring out the heart when you're talking about a particular topic. And I think that you folks were just wonderful in sharing your wisdom and your experience. So I'm grateful to you for that. Before I jump into the recommendations, I want to remind people who are joining us today via Zoom that you can put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll be getting to those in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us by Facebook, hi, glad you're there, and hope we connect soon. In 1948, the United Nations declared the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society, and it's entitled to the protection by society and the state. Family Matters Multi-Generational Living is on the rise and here to stay, includes recommendations based on what we learn from families that call on all elements of society and the state to do more to support and embrace these important families. Our top recommendations include increasing multi-generational housing stock and affordability, whether new or remodeled, as Kevin was talking about. For the housing industry, as Jessica mentioned, it's what people want. In a recent conversation with somebody from Lennar, who, when I was talking with them about their next gen homes, which they market as a home within a home, they say they're still their hottest seller. We also know that policy should encourage and not discourage multi-generational family living, including allowing for accessory dwelling units and housing for grandparents and other relatives who are raising children. We also said we need to shine a light on multi-generational living as an environmentally friendly housing option. Further research is needed, but we know so far that multi-generational households demonstrate lower energy and water use and consumption of fewer building materials. So they're environmentally friendly, which is really important. Expand access to affordable, high-quality child and adult daycare, which were among the top reasons given by families when they were asked why they came together. This includes offering incentives to increase the number of intergenerational shared sites that are offering childcare and adult daycare at the same place. Generations United has long advocated for combining care, which is good for the participants and less stressful for families who can deliver and pick up their loved ones at one location. Businesses can also offer workplace-based childcare and adult care, or they can support centers, sponsor centers that provide, among other things, extended hours and adequate wages. Expand paid family leave and flexible work environments. This includes workplace policies that recognize the increasing number of multi-generational families, including the need for flexible leave and work time options. Increase access to home and community-based services and supports. Access to respite, for example, provides family members a break. Home healthcare aides and home-based services help make transportation and juggling multiple appointments easier. As multi-generational family member Marjorie Connor told us, get as much help as you can get and just keep a good humor about everything, because they're going to be tough days. So those supports can really make a difference. Support innovative intergenerational approaches to education at home. I think we have an incredible opportunity right now with AmeriCorps seniors. They are developing innovative ways that their members can support children's education during remote learning and working to address learning loss that's happened because of the pandemic. It's an incredible force for good and can be channeled to help support our families, our multi-generational families, and all of our families. We also know that access to technology at home, supports for those who aren't as tech savvy or comfortable using tech as others are also needed, as well as access to the internet and investments in broadband expansion. There are additional recommendations in our report, but really what's most important is something we can all do. That is to honor and celebrate the resiliency and strengths of these households that every day prove we are stronger together. Vivian Nixon told us about her 4-generation family. She said, "We just feel so grateful to have my grandmother with us." That's what it boils down to. You know, she's 97. We're just lucky to have her. So whatever we have to do, we're willing to do. Everybody's been very malleable, understanding, and giving up of their space and time. I think that's the key. Families matter. They're the foundation of our multi-generational future. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it back to the incredible Jatrice Martel-Gator, who's going to handle the questions and answers. Remember, put them in the Q&A box. And thank you again for joining us. So now I believe all the other panelists get to turn on their video and their mics again, because Jatrice is going to be pointing questions at all of us. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Donna, and this incredible panel. And Amy, thank you for all the work you've done. Jessica, Robin, we got to learn how to live in a house with one bathroom from you. And Kevin, we have a lot of really good questions. So we're going to have to be efficient and brief with our answers. And let me start with, this goes to Jessica or Kevin. Are we shifting back to a time when older people live with their kids rather than senior housing?
I guess the short answer is we're certainly seeing it in the data. I'm not sure that the model of nursing homes and assisted living will ever fully go away, but it certainly seems that there's a lot of people embracing having older adult relatives with them.
Amy, a lot of the panelists and the recommendations talked about the environment. Are environmental activists promoting multi-generational housing as a way to save the planet?
It's such an interesting question. When I was researching for the report, I found several articles and some research studies that were addressing this in particular. As Donna said, you know, you can, by combining households, you use less water, you use less building materials, you use less power. There's so many ramifications that we don't always think about. You don't have to build a whole new home, you modify an existing home. So I think this is something that I expect to see and hear more about in the future as it starts to really be cemented that this is a trend that's not going away.
All right. Jessica, what type of safety features are important to multi-generational families?
So I think Kevin could probably speak better, but I'm just guessing wider hallways and doors. But I'm going to let Kevin take that one. If that's
Kevin,
okay.
Let's go to you.
Well, yeah, so the safety issues, there are a few of them that I always try to avoid. Yeah, wider hallways, wider doors, bathrooms. Actually, Jessica was on a show just recently, and with the replay, Jessica, that we were talking about was a multi-generational house that I performed from there. They had an addition put on a few years ago for her mother. And one of the things that the architect didn't do, but that I did, was talked about a bathroom, and the bathroom by just having a drop. As a contractor, what that means is we can do 2 floor levels. So when we put the tile down for the bathroom, it's seamless and there's no curb from the bathroom to the shower. And that just makes it a lot easier for some people. They don't want to have that big step to step over. So that's a big safety factor that we do put in, a lot of grab bars just to make it more functional and more comfortable for the senior age living.
Next question, Robin. How has your employer been helpful as you have managed your multi-generational household? Are there any supports that have been helpful to you or anybody else in your household from your employer?
My employer's been fantastic, actually. I work for a national insurance company. I work for the Hartford, and they've actually encouraged the dogs to bark in the background, the kids to come into the camera. Do what you've got to do, and family comes first. They've always supported that, and especially within this pandemic. When they sent everybody home, again, I had already worked from home, but for the most part, they offered a lot of different resources, EAP, you know, all sorts of employee assistance programs, telehealth visits, you know, all sorts of things. And that, you know, can include this type of additional stress with everybody being home and all of the stresses of now your teacher, caregiver, etc., on top of your normal daily job.
And John, I know it's important to note that I know, Robin, you mentioned to me that they have kind of support groups, employee resource groups,
yes,
around specific topics.
Right. We have working caregivers of older adults. We have a professional women's network. We have, you know, a mature professionals network. We have all sorts of networks, and we've talked about a lot of these. How has the pandemic changed things, and how is all of this? The multi-generational, the working caregivers of older adults, is one of those that I'm really active in. And it's amazing how much many of us are in that sandwich generation and taking care of, you know, grandkids and parents.
Jessica, do banks routinely accept income from the older generation to help with qualifications?
It's my understanding there's new mortgages out there that will even put 3 adults within a mortgage to really try and help. But I would encourage, you know, if you're going into a situation like that, just to go in with your eyes open. How long are you guys all going to be on that mortgage? If an older adult child moves away, what's the equity situation? What's the down payment going to do? Will you refi out of it, etc. Sorry, we also have a dog.
Amy,
Not part of that family.
right. Amy, how has diversity impacted multi-generational living? Or how has diversity, inclusion, and equity goals impacted multi-generational living? Either way.
Well, you know, one of the things we found in the survey was that I think Donna shared, I believe it's about 45% of the families are white, and smaller proportions of Hispanic, African American. But within those populations, there's larger percentage of Hispanic and Black African American families living in multi-generational homes. Our survey did not get a large enough sample of Asian Americans, of Native American Indians, or Pacific Islanders, Alaskan Natives. And so we weren't able to report that, but we know from other studies and other data that it is a larger incidence among those populations as well. So that's certainly an area we want to put more study into. And, you know, there's lots of reasons why this may be true. I think some of it is tradition. And, you know, we found 24% said that cultural and family expectations were part of this. It's just what you do. Dulce Medina, when I spoke with her, said, you know, you don't, of course we're moving. It wasn't even discussed. Of course we moved in with my mother. Jessica Wynn, another family that we interviewed, her husband is from the Philippines, and she said it's very taboo there to put loved ones in nursing homes. So that she knows that's not going to happen in their family with her mother-in-law who lives with them. So I do think that the cultural and family traditions have a lot to do with it.
Okay, this is our last questions, and I'm going to combine 3 questions, and they all go to Kevin. Kevin, for people that don't have enough space in their house and don't have enough money, what kind of zoning and land development codes are impacting the ability to create multi-generational living? And are there any new laws or interest in new laws supporting multi-generational building and the economics of buying?
There's no new laws or any codes that have really adjusted it. This is new for the building code aspect, that where these additions are being put on. But the best advice I can give to anybody is budget is a big part. Moving the family, and if they have to sell a house, and if they do need to move in, it's trying to find what's going to be best for the life need. Again, I keep talking about the life need, because there's sometimes you have the availability to put on that space. Does your loved ones or your elderly, do they need, if they're in good care, do they need extra care? Do they need to be where they can take care of themselves. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But for code and anything else like that, the code still states that if you are looking to build anything building, the laws have been there in place. There are setbacks, the zoning, anything you need to encroach there will be variance that will be needed. But what I try to do is what I did at my house was we just had a little bit of the corner of the addition go into the setback, which is the envelope we can only build into. When you go into that setback, we did have to get a variance. But what made it so easy is I went up. So that is a much better alternative for a lot of people. They don't have that foundation cost and a lot of that structure cost, or more of impervious, which is big now today, that we really don't want to encroach into, because it makes the variance much more difficult to get. So if you have the availability to go up and make it work at a great sense in finance and budget, I think that might be the best way to go for a lot of my listeners.
You know, I would just want to jump in and add that we're seeing, and Donna can speak to this too, that we're seeing accessory dwelling units zoning laws change around the country. We just passed them here in Alexandria, where people can actually build above a garage or in a separate thing. And some of the codes won't apply in that case because they're trying to expand the housing options.
Thank you. On behalf of Generations United, I'd like to thank each of the panelists again, Jessica, Kevin, and Robin. And Robin, you are an inspiration. Thank you. Amy Goyer, thank you for this excellent work on authoring this critical report. Family Matters, Multi-Generational Living is on the rise and here to stay. This report and the recording of this event are available on GU's Generations United websites. Please go and please share this very much, especially those recommendations. And I'd like to invite you all to join us at Generations United Global Virtual Conference on June 15th and 17th. Also, you can find more information about that on the website. And thank you for joining us either through Zoom or Facebook. And I want to leave you with a quote from Kofi Annan, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, I could say that, who said, "The happiness of any society begins with the well-being of families that live in it. And that includes multi-generational families." You all have been amazing. Thank you so much. Have the beautiful rest of your day.